Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today we're going to talk about my favorite topic, food. Our guest created and produced one of the most popular TV shows about food ever made, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, and he won 2 Emmy Awards for his work on that show. He's just released a new book called Food Americana, The Remarkable People and Incredible Stories Behind America's Favorite Dishes. This entertaining and appetizing book gives us the inside scoop, pun intended, on the history, subculture, and popularity of our favorite foods. And he writes about some of the best places to eat in America. And he even includes some iconic recipes from those restaurants. I'm delighted to welcome producer and author David Page to our show. David, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here.
David, before getting into your wonderful book, I know our viewers would like to know how you came up with the concept for diners, drive-ins, and dives.
By accident, I had been unsuccessfully pitching the Food Network over and over to one particular executive who kept politely saying no. One day on a pitch call, she said to me, "Don't you have anything about diners?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, I'm developing a show called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives." And she said, "That sounds interesting." This was like a late Thursday or Friday. "We have a development meeting Tuesday. Could you get me a write-up Monday?" And I said, "Absolutely." So I put down the phone, and on the one hand, this was good news because she was interested. On the other hand, I had just made the name up on the spot. I was not developing a show called Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives. And I spent a very busy weekend calling all over the country to speak to experts and restaurant owners. Gave her a pitch on Monday. They greenlighted a special shortly thereafter.
That's amazing. What was the most surprising food that you ever encountered in your 11 years on the show?
I guess, although I think I probably knew about it previously, but had never focused on it, the practice in New England of making a sandwich out of chop suey on a hamburger bun, which is not as bad as it sounds, but it ain't good.
Did you ever encounter a food item that was just so bizarre that you just couldn't put it on the show?
No, but that's because we did so much research before we went someplace. There was nothing to surprise us with. We picked places specifically based on A, the character of the owner, because it is TV and you need people who are TV friendly, but B, based on the foods that were made there and how they were made. And we went through step by step every recipe so we would know how to shoot it, because on the air, we included every step of every dish.
Okay, David, let's talk about your book.
Please.
This is the first book I've ever read that had my mouth watering the whole time. You must have had so much fun doing your research for this book. What made you decide to write it?
Well, first, thank you for the kind words. Secondly, every TV producer thinks he has a book in him, because writing for television is far more complicated than people realize. You can't just sit down and tell a story with your words. It can't be, "It was a dark and stormy night, and then Oedipus killed his father." It's writing for TV is a matter of using words as invisibly as possible to slide you from sound and picture to sound and picture and let the sound and picture tell the story. So for, I don't know, 40 years, I guess, I'd been saying deep inside me, wouldn't it be simple just to sit down and tell the story without any concern about pictures? Which is, in the final analysis, kind of strange because my writing style stole heavily from the way you tell stories on television. But that was the initial impetus. And secondly, I tend to want to change careers every few years. Up till now, it's all been in television, but in different kinds of television. I was an investigative reporter. I was a foreign producer. I was a morning show guy. Now I'm a food television guy. And it was time to do something else. So I said to myself, let's try that book.
You write that, and I'm quoting you here, the history of American food is the story of embracing another country's cuisine and then changing it. That really sums it up, doesn't it?
Absolutely. We had no indigenous cuisine. We're a very young country. And what we've done is embrace things that have come here, or in a couple of cases were originally here and explained to us by Native Americans. But obviously, we're going to change them. We're going to change them to suit our tastes, or in reaction to availability of ingredients. Pizza crust in America from the beginning was different than pizza crust in southern Italy in Naples because A, American wheat had a higher protein content, and B, we used coal ovens when immigrants first got to New York instead of the wood-fired ovens of Naples. So right off the bat, change was inevitable. And understand one other thing, all foods evolve over time. So once we've embraced a particular cuisine, it's going to evolve. I mean, in China today, we think of there's all sorts of foodies telling you they only want authentic Chinese food. Well, one of the most popular dishes in China today is scrambled eggs and tomatoes.
There's this whole controversy around the word authentic and a kind of snobbery around ethnic food, and they criticize Americanized versions of ethnic food as some sort of a bastardization or demonization. But why should we care if a dish is authentic or not, so long as we like how it tastes?
Well, I think the bigger question is authentic to what? A large combination plate swimming in beans and sour cream is authentic Tex-Mex cuisine. It is not authentic interior Mexican cuisine. And as long as you know the difference, you can be foodie as foodie can be, but you don't have to look down on one thing to appreciate another. And many of the food historians that I have talked with are really troubled by the word authentic because authentic to what? You can talk about food as it is eaten in that country versus how it's eaten here because we've changed it. But there's no lesser value to Mexican American or Chinese American. Now, if you want to be a snooty foodie with your nose in the air, or simply a well-informed and adventurous eater, certainly there are all sorts of foods that are eaten in other countries that you should try, that are wonderful, but they're not more valuable than the Americanized versions of them.
David, I want to ask you about some of the foods you write about in the book, starting with pizza. You live in New
Mhm.
Jersey, which is a pizza obsessed place, and
Yes.
you took a 1 week pizza making course in San Francisco. You wrote that much of America's love for pizza is rooted in history, nostalgia, and comfort. Why do you say that?
Well, first of all, it's a warm food. It's a tactile food. Unless you're a certain politician, you eat it by hand. And it's a food that most of us have eaten since childhood, as far back as we can remember. It's that ubiquitous across America. And let's face it, with two parents working, there are many days when the only option is a delivery pizza. It's also got this wonderful history in different places in different ways throughout America. When pizza, which had been brought initially to the East Coast by Southern Italian immigrants, began moving west, it changed, as all foods do, based on local preference and what was available. For example, in St. Louis, there's a cheese called Provel. It's a processed cheese combination. I think it includes Swiss and some others. That became the cheese with which you top a pizza. So that's St. Louis style pizza. In Detroit, one pizzeria owner decided he would make pizzas in these blue metal oil basins that had been liberated either from an auto plant or an auto parts plant, and that became Detroit style pizza. Every place you go, pizza became something very local, something that was a warm childhood memory. And what you've got across the country now is you have a number of family-owned pizza places that are keeping this tradition alive. It's a wonderful thing.
Do you think that the big pizza chains and franchises have been good for pizza in terms of the quality of what they're selling?
No, they've been good for pizza in terms of making it ubiquitous, after which hopefully you can try something else. I mean, pizza became a national item when it was picked up by chains that started in the Midwest, such as Domino's or Pizza Hut, and they produced a bland, very non-Italian style of pizza that caught on, especially as they picked up on the delivery trend that had in fact been started by some mom and pops. So what the chains did is they made pizza available pretty much everywhere. We are now going, now they didn't kill local pizzerias to the best of my knowledge. So you had kind of two paths, local and national. Over the past few years, maybe a decade or more, you're seeing a return to the traditional kind of pizza making from many years ago. Now it's got a fancy name. It's called artisanal pizza. But you are seeing more and more people choosing to get something that, in my view, is better than chain pizza. A foodie might even call it more authentic.
Do you have a favorite kind of pizza?
Yeah, absolutely. Pizza Napolitano, margarita style. It's the perfect pizza. It's got just the right amount of everything. I'm a fan of relative simplicity in foods. I think I certainly didn't invent this, but I ascribe to the concept of simple, good ingredients. And margarita is just done well. It's wonderful.
Okay, let's move on to Mexican food. You say that Mexican food and Mexican American food are two different cuisines. Can you explain the difference?
Sure, Mexican American food has evolved into a relatively set menu that is light on seafood, light on goat, light on a number of things that are key elements of the various regional Mexican cuisines. Understand, there is no Mexican food. There is regional Mexican food from one area or another. We're seeing one particular regional dish having a moment, though. That's birria, which is stewed meat, stewed in a spicy sauce made spicy by peppers, as with so much of Mexican cooking. Birria originally was popular in central Mexico, first as goat, then birria de res, which is beef. And at some point, not that long ago, it became popular in Tijuana, which is on the American border, but it had not been part of the food of the norteños, the northern Mexicans, who found themselves American when we moved the border after the Mexican-American War, and whose food became the basis of what we now think of as Mexican-American cuisine. Anyway, birria jumped the border from Tijuana to LA and has now completely crossed the country all the way to the East Coast in a unique form, birria tacos, which are, this is birria de res, so it's beef. You take the tortilla, you put it on a grill, you put some of the cooking liquid on it, you put the beef inside, you fold it over, you flip it, you serve it with a cup of the cooking liquid, which in this form is called consomme. And I got to tell you, I drive 90 minutes to South Philly for a particular birria de res truck there. It's a phenomenal dish. Now, what I don't know is birria de res having a moment and it will then kind of go away? Or is it going to become popular enough to join the ranks of other Mexican American foods? Dunno, hope it does.
Do you think that sometimes we can go too far? I mean, do we really need to put French fries in a burrito?
Well, if you like French fries in a burrito, I mean, too far. Yes, we can go too far, but personally, I think French fries are good in anything. No, I mean, go to Philadelphia, go have a sandwich at Primanti's where they put the French fries on the sandwich. Look, the hospitality business is, if it's done right, about making people happy. And if you can make people happy by putting French fries in a burrito, I mean, it was the owner of El Indio, that 80-year-old Mexican restaurant in San Diego, who explained to me that they started making the California burrito, which is French fries in a burrito with the beef, when someone asked for it. and it became incredibly popular. So they started offering it. Same with the chimichanga, which is a deep fried burrito, which apparently was invented in Arizona. I mean, none of this stuff is nailed down. Somebody might have deep fried a burrito elsewhere. But at El Indio, they had a customer ask for a chimichanga, and her father was still running the place, still alive. And he said, "What's a chimichanga?" And the guy explained, he said, "Oh, I can do that." So now they have chimichangas on the menu. If it's good, I have no problem with that sort of, quote, bastardization.
I understand that one of your favorite dishes is chicken and mole sauce.
Oh, God, yes. God, yes. There's a place called La Bamba here on Long Beach Island in New Jersey. And the couple that owns La Bamba comes from Puebla, which is one of the hotbeds of mole. And they make a mole that's just unbelievable. It's interesting because they use chocolate. I was actually initially wrong about what I thought mole was. I thought it always had chocolate. In fact, and I made this change a little too close to deadline to not scare me. Technically speaking, mole is a sauce based on peppers, and it can have vegetable seeds, nuts, fruit. La Bamba's mole has banana, for example, and it can often have chocolate, but not always.
Before we move on from Mexican food, I want to tell our viewers that I highly recommend the mashed potato taquito recipe in David's book.
Isn't
David,
that
thank
great?
you for the extra pounds, David.
Hey, I'm doing all I can to help America's obesity epidemic.
The next food group is barbecue, which seems to have become a huge competitive sport. You wrote that barbecue almost disappeared from our consciousness in the 70s and 80s, and now it's experienced a huge revival. Why?
The moment was right for celebrity pitmasters. Somebody anointed a couple of guys, and it kind of grew from there. Competitive barbecue on television helped, frankly. Although, as barbecue became popular, though, there's a whole racial element that is unfortunate at best and pernicious, I guess, at worst. Which is, if you're going to open a barbecue restaurant, you need financing. For the most part, that's easier for a white pitmaster than a black pitmaster. The people who have anointed celebrity barbecue pitmasters, the media, have picked on mostly white guys. The competition circuit, which, if you're serious, requires backing, has been far more attractive to or open to white guys. As a result, we're in the midst of a barbecue renaissance in which the public is not being told that the essence of most barbecue cookery in America is African American. You know, at Memphis in May 2019, which some consider the Super Bowl of barbecue competitions, the black faces I saw were not the owners of restaurants. They were the pitmasters of those restaurants working for the owners. And traditionally, barbecue has been an African American created entity, in that much of the flavoring and technique used in making barbecue from the beginning was the knowledge of enslaved Africans. Yeah, there have been over the years an awful lot of white people involved in barbecue. The short answer to your question is there's a political problem involved in it, but yes, barbecue is undergoing a great renaissance.
The thing that really surprised me when I read your chapter about barbecue is that it's a lot more complex than I would have imagined. It's a real art, isn't it?
It is, and it is an incredibly individualized art. That's something that people don't realize. All of the, I mean, you're dealing with the science of how to do the particular body part or whole animal that you're cooking in a way that turns tough meat tender, and that incorporates and emphasizes specific flavors based on where you are. Barbecue is so individual that the various regional kinds are believed to have started with one or a few pitmasters who tried something, and then it became popular in their region, and then it became a regional item, depending upon who was where. I mean, the mustard sauce of South Carolina, it is believed, was the result of German immigrants who were trying to recreate some of the tangy flavors that they used back home on dishes such as sauerbraten.
Before we move on to the next food group, I want to ask you, would you ever agree to be a judge on one of those cooking shows?
I don't have enough talent. I'm a really good amateur cook. I'm not a chef. Look, if it was a cooking show that simply said what tastes better, yeah, I'd be glad to. But the judging criteria on most of these shows include some chefy things that I would feel like an imposter trying to determine.
I'd like to see a cooking show with non-chefy stuff that most people actually cook and eat in their homes with you as a judge because you've tasted such great food from all across the country.
From your mouth to CAA's ears.
Okay, fried chicken. You
Yes.
wrote about the incredible success of Popeye's fried chicken sandwich, but
Mhm.
really from the perspective of food quality and taste, have any of the fast food chains done justice to fried chicken?
Most chefs will tell you, and this is information that preceded Popeye's entry into the race, the dirty little secret that most chefs hold is that Chick-fil-A is damn good. Now, I have never eaten a Chick-fil-A for political reasons, but apparently, according to those in the know, Chick-fil-A has its act together in terms of making and delivering excellent food, that this is a place that knows how to do what it does very well. I'll have to take their word for it.
Well, I like the KFC extra crispy for whatever it's worth.
My wife loves KFC.
You've written about the racist connotation that's sometimes connected to fried chicken. Is
Yes,
there anything that we can do to overcome any harmful imagery or stereotypes? I mean, in the end, isn't it just all about the food?
it should be all about the food. The fact of the matter is that I believe it was in the era of Jim Crow, but there was a conscious decision made to associate the fact that fried chicken is eaten with the hands with an attempt to portray African Americans as primitive. And it stuck in many places, despite the fact that fried chicken traditionally has been completely pan-racial in the South, as much a white food as black. And frankly, in the earliest days, when it was being prepared by enslaved Africans for white plantation holders, it was rare that African Americans could even get chicken other than those that they may have raised on their own. But the fact of the matter is, if the plantation owner is allowing slaves to raise some food on their own, and you have a chicken and it's laying eggs, you ain't going to kill it.
Now, let me ask you about chicken wings. You say they're so popular because they're so versatile in terms of flavors and dipping sauces. What's the most unusual flavor you've ever heard of?
I guess peanut butter and jelly, although it doesn't strike me as awful. I mean, look, the thing about a chicken wing is it's portable. It's devourable in a couple of, I mean, depending upon your technique. I'm one of those who uses my teeth to like pull the meat off the bone. And it's perfect for sporting events and the like. What's interesting is that the buffalo wing, which was originally defined as a chicken wing, tip removed, the drum and flat taken apart and handled as separate pieces, deep fried, no coating, served with blue cheese. That's supposedly the definition of the buffalo wing. And in fact, there was a restaurant in Buffalo making wings before the Anchor Bar invented this kind. The place was called Wings and Things. It was owned by an African American, John Young, and he served his wings. He deep fried them in one piece with a combination sweet spicy sauce he called mambo sauce or mumbo sauce, depending upon whose writings you're looking at. Anyway, he didn't get credit for the buffalo wing because it wasn't the buffalo wing that the Anchor Bar invented. Nonetheless, we now have 3 billion flavors of wings that have little to do with what the Anchor Bar invented, and they're still generically referred to as buffalo wings.
I hear people talk all the time about boneless chicken wings, but they're not really wings at all, are they?
Well, they're basically chicken McNuggets. The problem with buffalo wings for those who try to serve them is each chicken only has two wings. So literally, the increasing popularity of wings has created a shortage. It's hard for restaurants to get as much of the product as they need, which is why you see the invention of the boneless wing, which is basically other meat from the chicken. I think it's breast meat that is sort of shaped into a wing thing and then deep fried. One of the large chains is looking to do something with thigh meat.
The next food on my list is sushi. You wrote that Yul Brynner was one of the
Mhm.
first celebrities to make it cool to eat sushi, and that the TV miniseries Shogun made sushi popular. And now young people actually consider sushi to be an American food. That's an amazing example of cultural appropriation, isn't it?
No, it's an amazing example of cultural integration. I'm not fond of the appropriation word because what is it you're stealing and how? Maybe I'm wrong, but I think most people know that sushi originated in Japan, although an antecedent of it may have been present in China before that. Sushi just somehow entered our consciousness at the right time when Americans were being told to eat more seafood, and there was some increasing interest in health. And then Shogun hit, and Hollywood became enamored of sushi. And what Hollywood does, the rest of the country aspires to. And then the industry very intelligently went with sushi as Americans wanted to go with it. It's become supersized. It's mostly rolls as served in America with all kinds of sauces. It's like everything is the Big Mac of sushi. Now, is that bad? No, if that's what you want to eat. Can you still get sushi that is more traditional? Sure. But I profiled a gas station sushi bar in Oklahoma City, or outside of Oklahoma City, across from Tinker Air Force Base, where they were facing theoretically quite a barrier getting many people in Oklahoma to get into raw fish. So their big sellers are deep fried. They make a sushi roll and they deep fry it. And some of those rolls have deep fried things inside them. And they're doing very well. But if you want to get nigiri, which is basically a piece of fish on top of vinegared rice, they do that very well. And by the way, sushi doesn't have to involve fish. Sushi is only about the vinegared rice, and what you put on it or with it does or doesn't make it sushi or not.
Well, you wrote that sushi is all about the rice. Why is the rice more important than the other ingredients like the fish or the vegetables?
Well, none of the ingredients should be bad. Everything should be as good or as fresh as possible. Sushi was defined a long time ago in Japan as vinegared rice. The vinegared rice evolved from early attempts at preserving fish for long term by rolling them, wrapping them in vinegared rice. The rice would decompose, but the fish would be protected. Over time, people began to take the fish and rice out of storage much earlier in the process and figured out that the rice was good and need not be thrown away at that point. And sushi, sort of as we know it, evolved.
I love what you wrote about calamari. Is it true that it became a popular American food because of a shortage of fish?
Yeah, the fishermen off Long Island were facing a crisis of dwindling supplies of their stock in trade. They were in trouble, and a combination government and university project was put together to see what can we do to help the ailing fishing industry. And the suggested answer was squid. Now, the suggested answer also included a number of other suggestions. Don't call it squid because no one's going to buy it. Call it calamari. That sounds attractive. Uh, and at the time, by the way, squid was going for like 10 cents a pound because it was only used as bait. Call it calamari, deep fry it, and there was a tradition of that in Italy. And don't try to make it an entree because there's only so many tentacles that an American's gonna eat. Make it an appetizer. And it was such a success in such a short period of time that the New York Times created an index of trendiness to compare how trendy something was. They used as their baseline the timeline of the ascent of calamari from basically non-existence to huge popularity.
That's amazing. Okay, let's move on to the Great American Burger, which in my opinion is the most iconic, quintessential American food. I thought I'd eaten every type of burger imaginable, David, but in your book, I learned about the peanut butter burger, and you actually gave the recipe in the book, and I tried it. It's actually really good.
Well, it is. We have this image of peanut butter as almost a sweet because people eat it with jelly. The fact of the matter is, the peanut flavor has been a stalwart throughout much of other cuisines forever. Thai cuisine, Southern Thai cuisine, is heavily dependent on the flavor of peanuts. I can't speak for Northern Thai. Most people don't realize there's a big difference. But no, the peanut butter burger, he said, stumbling over it as if he had peanut butter in his mouth, is an excellent thing. And I mention, well, I feature in that chapter the Triple X family restaurant near Purdue University in Indiana. They've been making it for years. It's by far their number one burger. But burgers, like pizza, perhaps even more than pizza, are an item that is localized or regionalized or even specific to a particular restaurant or two. There's an ongoing battle in the Twin Cities about which of two different restaurants invented the Juicy Lucy, which is now featured at a number of restaurants. And it's basically molten cheese on the inside of the burger, which can be great. I prefer mine with blue cheese. But burgers are, I mean, you got the California burger with guacamole. I mean, anything with guacamole, I guess, is California. You have the green chili cheeseburger in New Mexico, which is an amazing thing. The thing with a burger is fried chicken doesn't sound that complicated, but making fried chicken can be hard. Yeah. Anybody can make a burger. And anybody can make an acceptable burger because so many different types of burgers are accepted. You can smash them, you can make them big, you can do what you want.
I have to tell you that for me, when it comes to burgers, the quality of the bun is just as important as the meat and the toppings. Do you agree?
I agree with that concept beyond burgers. The quality of every ingredient matters. When you're talking about lobster rolls, you have to have the right bun and you have to have the right proportion. Okay, and this certainly goes for burgers. You can't mess the balance up. If you have a real strong flavored bun on a burger like a pretzel bun, that's going to fight some of your condiments, some of your toppings. I mean, I recently had a bagel with lox and cream cheese, which is my favorite. But instead of smoked salmon, I got real lox, which is much saltier. And without thinking, I asked for it on an everything bagel. There's too much going on there. You can't have all of those flavors, including salt, on the bagel and on the lox. So many dishes, all dishes for that matter, are dependent on the the balance between flavors and textures and volumes. To mention a lobster roll again, so many places crow about the fact that they give you so much lobster on the lobster roll. Well, okay, thanks for the extra food, but there should only be a certain amount of lobster on that roll so that the flavor of the butter grilled bun can add to the flavor of the lobster because it's the combination of flavors that you're after.
And finally, let's talk about Chinese food. I was amazed when I went to China about 10 years ago. I couldn't find even a trace of the Chinese food that I had been eating my whole life. It was nowhere to be found in China. How did that happen?
Well, first of all, China's highly regional. It's a huge country with multiple regional cuisines. The food that we think of as Chinese American evolved from Cantonese, brought here originally by Chinese workers who came for the gold rush, and whose food very quickly had to adapt to Western tastes to sell it to Westerners. But you're right, very little of what is eaten in China would bear even passing resemblance to what we think of as Chinese food. Yes, there's noodles. Yes, there's dumplings. But the fact is, we have changed Chinese food to our taste perhaps more than any other cuisine. What's interesting is food as eaten in China is now increasingly available in the United States because enough Chinese immigrants have come here recently that you can make money with a restaurant targeting Chinese immigrants as opposed to Americans. In the book, I was taken to a huge Chinese food hall featuring everything from back home. I was guided through it by a couple of Chinese students. The food was incredible. And some of it was recognizable, hand-pulled noodles, dumplings, that sort. But much of it was not. Much of it was offal, innards, and duck blood, that sort of thing. But it was fantastic because remember, Chinese cuisine puts much more emphasis on texture variety the way we may put emphasis on flavor variety. Things that don't feel good to an American when chewing would feel delightful to someone who's been raised with those textures. And a lot of the use of offal is about texture. Of course, it's also about not wasting any food, where most cuisines started in the first place in poverty. So American cuisine is one of the few that turns its nose up at a lot of things.
David, your book is jam-packed with interesting facts. For example, I did not know that ice cream was given to the American troops in World War II to help them recover from combat fatigue. And there was even an ice cream factory set up on a barge in the South Pacific. That's amazing.
Yeah, the American troops got special treatment during the war in terms of availability of ice cream, which for consumers at home was reduced in quality because of a lack of availability of ingredients during a time of rationing. The butterfat percentage of most commercial ice creams in the States went down. And most of the basic quality, when you're talking in terms of grades of ice cream, is about butterfat.
Now, David, I can just imagine there must be some viewers out there thinking, my heavens, every food that's been mentioned on this show is unhealthy. So let me ask you, why do unhealthy foods still dominate the American diet?
Well, first of all, let me back you up. Not everything we mentioned is unhealthy. There's a lot of Mexican cuisine, like ceviche, which is not Mexican American, which is extremely healthy. A piece of basic pizza with 300 calories in it isn't bad for you. There's a lot, it depends how you eat your food. But in terms of our preferences, there are those who consider it some sort of conspiracy, others who say, hey, what happens, happens. But certainly beginning with the era of convenience foods and fast foods, we've become addicted, and I don't use that word easily, but we've become addicted to salt, sugar, and fat, none of which are awful in proper amounts, but they are the basis of junk food. And given a choice, that's where people now migrate. David Portalatin, who is possibly the leading food industry analyst in the US, says of Americans, we like to try something new if we already know it. Hence, we're eating a lot of chicken because we think it's healthy, but we're sure as hell frying it.
Well, David, if you've seen my show, you'll know that most of my interviews are pretty intense because we're talking about people's lives and careers and important events. So your appearance on our show has been a real breath of fresh air and very appetizing. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Thank you very much for inviting me and for reading the book.
Our guest has been food expert and author David Page. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer Steve Silver. Thank you all for joining us. See you next time.
Remember to subscribe to the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. And be sure to check out more great interviews with Harvey Brownstone on harveybrownstoneinterviews.com.